Welcome to Wellsprings of Faith. My name is Father Jürgen Liias. I'm a Roman Catholic priest. I'm a senior priest in the staff of St. Patrick's Church in Stoneham, the neighboring community to the Melrose, where this studio is. And our program looks at religious faith and the journey of faith in a person's life and the fruit of that faith in their life's work. Today, I want to welcome a new colleague at St. Patrick's, Father Patrick Fiorillo. He is a parochial vicar there. We now have had 3 new priests in the last year, all of whom have been interviewed on my show. It's been great to have them share. My previous colleagues refused to come on the show, so I never managed to get them here. But thank you for being here. I know you didn't want to come, but I'm glad you finally agreed to come.
This seems like it must be a prerequisite for working at St. Patrick's now. So.
Well, I've been doing this show. I think my chief cameraman, Bill House, has been with me almost since we started this show in the mid-'90s. So it's 30 years we've been doing this show. It says we're doing, I think, 471 shows. So nice. Welcome, number 471.
Thank you.
Anyway. Welcome to St. Patrick's, welcome
to
Stoneham, welcome to this neighborhood, and welcome to the priestly work at St. Patrick's, which I've been privileged to be part of these last 10 years. So tell us, this show is about one's journey in faith. As far back as you can remember, start talking about, how you kind of developed your relationship to the Lord.
Sure, well, it's great to be here, and I guess this is providential that we're doing this because since I arrived in April, our paths have not really overlapped too much with summer vacations and all that stuff. So this is kind of like our chance to get to know each other for real.
It's sort of an odd
this is
way.
not staged here. This is actually.
That's right. I've been looking forward to getting to know you. Here we finally can do it.
So, well, yeah, it's great to be here. I'm beginning my 3rd assignment as a priest here in St. Patrick's in Stoneham. I've been ordained 8 years, so I'll work backwards. Spent the last 6 years at St. Paul's in Cambridge, which also includes the Harvard chaplaincy. So I served as parochial vicar of the parish and the undergraduate chaplain for the Harvard Catholic Center there. So that was the past 6 years. And then for the 2 years before that, I was at St. Brendan's and St. Anne's parishes in Dorchester, in southeast Dorchester, in the neighborhood of Neponset. So then I was ordained 6 years of seminary here in Boston. Before that, I earned my bachelor in music from the Hart School of Music, which is part of the University of Hartford. And so I went there for 5 years. Before that, I was born and raised in Franklin, Massachusetts, so the southwest corner of the Archdiocese of Boston. For a Bostonian, it's the boonies, but Bostonians sometimes are surprised to hear there's.
But isn't it? I've heard that's all, but it is the largest parish in the.
It was for a time, yes.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
It's big. The population of the town exploded in the '90s, so it's actually a similar town to Stoneham.
Yeah, that's right. It's a single parish in the town. With some communities, like Melrose, actually have 3 Catholic churches, so they're not as big as St. Patrick's is, which is the only one at Stoneham.
Yeah.
That's true in Franklin, too.
So, so I was raised Catholic and received all the sacraments of initiation there at St. Mary's. Went to public school, then St. John's High School in Shrewsbury, Massachusetts, and then college. So, here I am.
So that's, I don't think of anyone tell their spiritual journey backwards.
No, there you go, yeah.
But maybe we can go in the reverse.
Sure.
I mean, were your parents a pretty faithful, active, pretty committed Catholic family?
Yeah, I was raised always practicing the faith, going to Mass on Sunday, and I always believed in God myself, so I always would have identified as Catholic, although maybe wasn't always had a mature understanding of what that meant, but that really changed in college when I started to meet other peers who took their faith seriously, and that was really a new experience for me. It had a profound impact on me.
Was it in high school and stuff that you I mean, we kind of went through you were faithful to being a practicing Catholicism, but
Yeah, I think the Lord was planting a lot of seeds during that time in high school. Again, I wouldn't have, faith wasn't a thing I would have given much personal or critical thought to
I
during
see.
that time, even though I always would have, openly identified as Catholic,
identified,
but I couldn't have really.
So there were no
Yeah.
particular significant religious moments in your kind of
Well,
pre-college time,
when I
or
look,
major rebellions either.
yeah, when I look back on it, I can identify some important moments where certainly grace was at work, but I didn't realize it at the time. Yeah,
Like what? Like
confirmation, I think,
confirmation,
for sure.
the sacrament, yeah.
I think seeing how I became more open and yeah, just intentional about at least just saying I believed in God and going to mass.
Yeah,
and
you
all
were
that.
always. I mean, there was a sincerity of heart always, and faith.
Yeah, there was a high school teacher that planted some seeds as well. We had these elective classes, religion classes, senior year. So this one class I took was, I forget the specifics, but it was just a discussion class on moral issues, like modern, contemporary moral issues.
Was that a Catholic high school in Shrewsbury?
Yes, St. John's, So, and I think that I was always inclined to believe all of those things. So it wasn't provocative to me in any way, but it kind of started to open my mind to just sort of deeper principles about the faith, and it just it really attracted me, even though at the time I didn't see it in terms of like spiritual conversion or anything, but then later on in college I would look back and see those things as really important.
Yeah, prior to college, did you ever have thoughts of priesthood, or that's something?
No, not at all.
Not at all.
Yep. So. Yep, that came during college.
College.
Really,
so talk about some of those significant moments in college.
So I went to, as I said, the University of Hartford, which is a pretty secular school. There, and I started to get involved in our Newman Club, as we called it. That's the campus ministry, and it's a relatively small group there on campus. In my fast forwarding ahead to my years as a priest, as a chaplain at Harvard, at the big Harvard Catholic Center, I used to always tell the students how lucky they were to have a big campus ministry with so many opportunities, because what I had at University of Hartford, I mean, it was the best we could do, but just given the population, we'd get maybe 20 or 30 students to Mass on Sunday.
Well, you said it was a branch of the University of Hartford. So
yeah, the whole university was about 5,000.
Yeah,
so actually similar to Harvard, really, in terms of undergraduate. So, but yeah, we would just set up for Mass in a classroom. No chapel or anything, 20 to 30 students, and then our club would sponsor events for which we would get 5 to 10 people for, So it was a small community.
And that was not just a school of music, but the whole.
Correct. That's the whole university.
The whole university.
Yeah, the Hart School was just one of the several colleges within there. So so I started getting involved there initially, really just as a place to meet people, because I figured that's a natural starting place to meet people that you have things in common with.
Right.
But as I said, it just kind of really started to stick. I was deeply inspired and moved by these other peers who were faithful and passionate about their faith and knew theology well. And then so I just started getting more and more involved in activities there. And then a kind of turning point came on a retreat that I decided to go on with the group. Just about a dozen of us. We went down to Ender's Island.
Oh yes, I've been there.
Yeah. So that was our weekend retreat place in November of 2005, I guess. We had a guest speaker there that just gave a personal testimony and spoke very passionately about the faith in a way I'd never heard before. I'd never heard like a personal testimony really from somebody.
But there's not as much a Catholic. Thing as it is in this kind of evangelical Protestant world, which I kind of grew up in.
So that really just deeply moved me. And then he became my mentor, really. He was an older gentleman. And so we kept in touch, and to use our modern campus ministry lingo, he became my discipler.
Yes.
So he really formed me a bit, and we just had deep theological discussions about things my first couple years of college, and so I started building a prayer life and deepening friendships with these other Catholics. Got involved in other Catholic things in Hartford, and that was the context in which I started discerning the vocation.
What was it? Was it a challenge though to be in a, a pretty predominantly secular, and everything that kind of goes with that? Not necessarily hostility to the faith, but probably some hostility at times, but certainly apathy to even religious things.
Yeah, I would say probably more apathy than anything else. I mean, I've never been in an environment, whether from childhood or even since priesthood, where it's sort of majority devout Catholics. So, so it didn't, it didn't sort of feel secular at the time. It was just, well, it's just like the world. Most people are either nominally religious or not at all.
Not at
all.
Yeah.
So that never seemed to be a challenge, and in a positive sense, because when you have a good community, which I did, even though it was tiny, but my closest friends came from those 10 or so people in the Newman Club at the time, and so and I think you can't ask any more than having a circle of a few close friends with whom you can share your faith with. So so that worked out.
It might be fun to digress for a minute on Newman clubs, because obviously that's sort of been the standard name of Catholic campus ministry for, I don't know, I suppose for a long time.
Well,
and as a former Anglican,
knowing your background,
well, that's why I have a,
you probably know a lot more about him than I do.
Well,
so.
only that he was a convert like me from Anglicanism, but also, interesting enough, a lot of Catholics don't really unaware in the Anglican tradition. There's a very strong Catholic strain of, and which really was started by John Henry Newman and a group of other Anglican priests in the 1830s called the Oxford movement, the Tractarian movement, the Anglo-Catholic movement, they're different titles. And it was really to restore Catholic elements to Anglicanism that had been lost, but also to hope for one of the visions, certainly of Newman and some of the early Anglo-Catholic fathers, was also to bring Anglicanism back into full communion with Rome. It was a vision, and in a way, I'm part of this thing, I think they're called the Anglican Ordinariate, which was actually probably almost a fulfillment of that dream, that under Pope Benedict, he established this provision. Anglicans have always, including Cardinal Newman, who became a Catholic 150 years ago, almost 200 years ago, actually. But there have always been people crossing the bridge between Canterbury and Rome over the centuries. But really a provision for actually the Anglican branch, you might say, was a way of Benedict to be grafted back in, so we're allowed to actually do an Anglican-style Mass. We have obviously our own bishop. Most of our priests are former Episcopal priests or Anglican priests. So, so anyway, back to
I don't know. It's an interesting question. Who started using the name Newman?
I'd be interested
because it comes from back in, I presume, maybe the 60s or so. Once, because prior to the 1960s, Catholics were discouraged from going to secular colleges, right? And so, I mean, even in Boston, I remember there were cases about the bishop banning like folks from going to Harvard, right?
Really?
So
oh wow! I didn't know it was that
so,
severe.
Yeah, and so it wasn't until I think the 50s or 60s that it became more of a common thing for Catholics to go to non-Catholic colleges. And so therefore this new need for campus ministries arose. And then so they started calling them Newman clubs. But I wonder who
Well, I
did
might
that.
be, because among Newman's, I mean, he was an extraordinary, brilliant mind and wrote about many things that have, I mean, some people would say he was the foremost Catholic theologian of the 19th century. But one of the things, he wrote a book called The Idea of the University, and he had a very strong interest in the relationship between education, higher education, and Christian faith and Catholic faith, and he had a real vision. So it might have been that particular dimension of his scholarly genius that might have motivated whoever the person was who started the Newman Center. So that became really a spiritual home and source of sustenance and growth. When did the spark of interest in holy orders?
Priesthood,
Yeah.
Same with just being raised in the faith, I said that I can look back and see, little seeds planted, but none that I would have recognized as such during, at the time. But certainly confirmation and all that. But
were you also a server as a boy?
Yep. Yeah, I was. Yep.
That, yeah.
And then, and I mean, one of these memories was because St. Mary's in Franklin is such a big parish, we would always get a newly ordained priest assigned to that parish. And so I just distinctly remember, I've never even had a personal conversation with him, but I just distinctly remember his face in high school and his first Mass at St. Mary's. It was just just another Sunday to me in June, or May or June of that year, and just seeing him process in and introduce himself and talk about his life story. I mean, that was a testimony as well. I do remember being very moved by that. Again, it never struck me as like, oh, maybe that's for me. But I was, it did stick in my mind, and I would reflect on that later on. But yeah, the really defining moment came just in a moment of clarity. It was pretty sudden, I guess. I mean, being a spiritual director to different people, and especially college students, I know people can agonize for years about vocation and discernment. So I do feel blessed in this sense that I kind of had a moment of clarity and just kind of stuck with it, and that was it. But there was a popular movie that came out in the early 2000s that was whose production was sponsored by the U.S. bishops. It was called Fishers of Men, and it was just a 15-minute, quick, dramatic documentary highlighting the lives of a few different priests as a way of promoting priestly vocations. But it was very well done. It was done by Grassroots Films, which was this really nice Catholic production company in Brooklyn, New York. I had a friend from college that ended up working for them. So this movie was popular at the time. I saw it once at a men's conference in Boston. I remember being moved by this, and then just at a random moment, literally of just procrastination from my homework. I was sitting in my apartment one day in college. It was my junior year, so I would have been 21 at the time. And it just dawned on me, like, hey, I remember being moved by this movie. But I never really had time to sort of reflect on why or pray about it. So let's just pull it up online and watch it again.
Watch it again.
And I did, and it just hit me like just a ray of light in that moment. I saw myself very distinctly in the movie, like as just drawn to the lives of those priests, the way they depicted it. And so I mean, that's it. I saw the movie. I said, that's my vocation. I mean,
it's funny you should say that, because in a way, this crazy idea about doing this like TV show, which I've said I've been doing for 471 shows. I always wonder, I mean, as local cable TV, does anyone ever watch it? Is it of any use to the kingdom of God? But I do have this sense this stuff is out there, particularly nowadays. When we originally started, we give everybody a cassette recording of the thing, and that had a little more extension than just the local cable TV, which showed a couple of times a week. Who watches cable TV? Not many people. The local cable. And then it went into DVDs, which got a little more. But now this show will be shot up to YouTube, and you'll be in cyberspace for the rest of
the whole world could know this story.
And you never know where that God uses things. You know that certainly we as Catholics have that sacramental sense of reality that God touches us. You know, and that we touch you with the film, and obviously more deeply touches us with the sacraments.
Yeah,
wonderful. So that second viewing of the film grabbed you.
That hit me, yes.
Yeah,
so, and I also saw, as my heart kind of opened up to seeing that now as a possibility, priesthood, it did, like other things in my life, kind of made sense in light of that, like because I found myself.
Well, obviously, you were full of music, so you must have been. Music must have been a big part of your life.
It was, I was very drawn to sacred music and all that.
Were you thinking about a musical career?
I was studying music production, so I was, I was an audio engineer, so a studio music producer and all that. So I was doing freelance stuff on my own. I was mainly doing live classical concert recording. That was my main thing. So I did that a lot freelance, just had my own rig with the computer and microphones and all that, and just went around, was and recorded concerts and recitals and things like that.
And I gather, I heard rumor you're also a musician yourself.
Yep. Yeah. So my instrument, since everybody has a musical instrument at the conservatory, mine was not classical music, even though that was my focus on work. I'm a drummer, so I did jazz drums.
Jazz drums. Yeah. Yeah, I guess there's a little timpani on in the symphonic world, but probably not much in Gregorian.
That's right. Yeah.
In classical, I had the most rich. One of the rich parts of my background was I was a priest at a place called Church of the Advent in downtown Boston, and of course it was solemn high mass. I mean, that was a Newmanite. It was started in 1840, early on, as to promulgate the principles of the Oxford movement, and of course among them was the beauty of the liturgy.
They do orchestral masses there, right?
Yeah, orchestral masses, and every Sunday there's a full choir doing, you know, Palestrina or a bird or some polyphonous mass. Every Sunday I was surrounded by this extraordinary sound with incense wafting up, and it was we sort of did solemn high mass the old way with ad orientem and everything. So it was just always a little taste of heaven every Sunday mass, and which I have to say, I've confessed I don't experience as much of that musical heaven in the Catholic Church, but it's there. It's
there.
It's another thing about Anglicans. We've kept what the Catholic Church has lost, but it's actually all Catholic music.
That's right. Yep.
So on to seminary, where we're going to get you ordained, so we can talk a little bit about your life as a priest. We're running along quickly, so let's do that. Now you went to seminary. I'm sure there are rich parts of that. You've now been a priest 8 years, starting a new work here in this parish. So what do you love about being a priest? What
do I love?
What do you love the most, and what is most
I can't.
challenging?
People often ask, "What's your favorite sacrament to celebrate?" And my answer to that is always, every priest I know answers that question the same way. So, and I'm no exception. Here in confessions, of course, is a great blessing. Just because you get to see God's mercy in action, if you will, before your eyes. And you know, people often wonder, as they probably ask you, like, "Oh, isn't that such a burden to always hear people's junk and sins and all that stuff?" But I respond, and again, every priest I know would say the same thing. Sin is boring, so I don't remember that, right? I mean, and it's all the same at the end of the day. I mean, we have the same struggles, right? So what's memorable and beautiful is seeing someone come to life, raised to new life. So so that's been a huge blessing. And yeah, I was blessed the last 6 years in Cambridge. We had a huge confession ministry there. We would always hear dozens every week, and mostly just you know, one-on-one appointments and people just grabbing you on the sidewalk from the church. So yeah, so that continues to be a source of consolation.
In the Anglican tradition, confession is there, but it's not highlighted, and it's as we used to say, all may, none must, some should, you know. So that's the funny way we talked about confession. And I was a great believer in it, being a more Anglo-Catholic in my spirituality and theological background. So I pushed it, but a few people came, few were regular penitents. But that has been, as a Catholic priest, one of the enormous new dimensions. I mean, I've had, in terms of the volume of it and the richness of it and the frequency of it, and like you said, the sacred kind of ground of, and it can be, I mean, I've been working at the Healing Shrine. Sometimes I'm in the confessional for 3 hours. It can be exhausting.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yes.
And there's a lot of pain out there, a lot of pain in people's lives. But Christ is the medicine, you know. Yeah. So to be the doctor who gives them the medicine that works is a great privilege.
Right. So yeah, so that's been probably the greatest joy. Obviously saying Mass, but it's funny explaining to people, because objectively speaking, the Mass is the greatest thing that we do. But it's one of those things, because it's a mystery. So I feel like as I grow personally, I'm entering more deeply into the understanding of the Mass. So like I celebrate Mass. I'm conscious of things at Mass much differently than I was when I was first ordained,
Yeah.
because the Mass is something you really live and grow into on a deeper mystical level. So, so objectively speaking, Mass is the greatest part, but it's something you really grow into more, right? As
Right.
you've probably
And
so.
it's obviously a different encounter with the people of God because it's public and more as a group there, as opposed to the one-on-one, which
Right.
is obviously very, very, the pastoral dimension of that is so, as I said, just sacred ground to
Yeah.
enter into the deepest struggles of people, the deepest pains of people.
Yep.
And what was, you spent a good chunk of time at Harvard.
Yep.
What was the ministry there, and particularly these days where Harvard's in a lot of tumult and
Yep. No shortage of press on Harvard. So yeah,
but
yeah. No, that's the $1,000,000 question. You know, I get asked all the time. What you know, what's it like being Catholic at Harvard? Right? Everybody's dying to know. And so it was very interesting being there because, you know, like most things in life, the reality on the ground is a lot different from, you know, what you might perceive from just news.
yeah, the press. Yeah, right.
So it is very interesting being at a place that's reported on constantly by the news. I mean, we used to get the Boston Globe at the Rectory, and it seems like every other day there was some front page story about something
And they
related to
wanted
Harvard.
the Catholic
you know.
opinion.
Yeah, and so just seeing that, being kind of on the inside about what was going on was very interesting. So that being said, yeah, faith is alive and well there, I would say, and before I came too. So and not just the fruit of my ministry, but and I think a reason for that people overlook is that Harvard is huge. I mean, there's 20 to 30,000 students there when you include the graduate schools that are spread all over Boston, and people come from all over the world to Harvard, and that includes people from very religious cultures in Africa and Asia and all that, and so. Just the sheer size of Harvard brings about an inherent religious diversity that's going to make it more open to religion than some smaller American secular schools.
That's true. Probably
so,
like the University of Hartford.
Yeah.
And
So.
you know, I noticed that my son went to the University of Pennsylvania, and there was pretty much a secular Ivy League school, but there was interesting enough, the Christian fellowship at the school were mostly foreigners.
Yeah.
And so you're right. So there were a lot of foreign students from Africa, from South America, from Asia, Korea, and these were. This is where the Christian energy. I don't know about at least the Protestant Christian energy in the student. That's my son was. I was still in Biscayne, my son. And it was the vitality of the Christian presence was the foreigners. That's true in the city too. A lot of the in Boston, a lot of the most vibrant churches are the ethnic churches. So. And of course, one advantage of Catholic churches, we are a Catholic church, and so ethnicity has always been part of our presence.
So
look at where I can't believe. You were worried we'd have a slow-going show. I'd like to have another half hour with you, but unfortunately we're down to 1.5 minutes.
All right.
So what's one hope for your life here in this area, St. Pat's and Stoneham? One of your dreams?
Yeah, I mean, I came here knowing that it was already a very strong parish with many great pastors recently. Certainly Father Mario, we're celebrating his anniversary of death, rest in peace, tomorrow. So there's many great things here, and so I just feel like it's just, I'm blessed I feel like it's an easy opportunity to just build on that and expand young adult and couples outreach. I find there's many young people that seem to settle in Stoneham after kind of getting married or whatever, so I think there's plenty of opportunity there. So yeah.
Well, we're rejoiced to have you to be part of this team. May God bless you in your ministry.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, and we'll have to have you back to part 2 of the Father Patrick story. All right.
Deal.
I hope you've enjoyed this conversation with Father Patrick, and I do encourage you to come for those Catholics who might be looking for a church or other people looking for God. St. Patrick's is a pretty dynamic parish with a lot of opportunities for people of all ages to grow in their faith. So may God bless you in your faith as well. Thank you.